A 2022 review of the Farm Bill, Title 12 Department Operation and Outreach will come to order. Welcome, and thank you for joining today's hearing. After brief opening remarks, members will receive testimony from our witnesses today, and then the hearing will be open to questions. Thank you to the Undersecretary and to the Administrator for joining today's hearing, which is another in our series of hearings to review the 2018 Farm Bill and prepare for the 2023 Farm Bill. I appreciate you both taking the time to be here and offer your expertise. I especially thank you for being here in person. During this hearing, we will hear from the USDA about the implementation of the 2018 Farm Bill provisions and the impact on department operations and outreach programs, like the Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Development Program. This is also an opportunity to learn how the COVID-19 pandemic and other events over the past 4 years have impacted the department and these important programs. Today's testimony will be critical as we craft the 2023 Farm Bill and will help to ensure that we do so with an eye on how the structure and operations of USDA impact our nation's farmers, ranchers, and all those the department serves. USDA is comprised of 29 agencies and offices with more than 100,000 employees, and there are more than 4,500 USDA offices in the U.S. and across the world. Ensuring that Congress properly funds, supports, and oversees USDA operations so that the department operates effectively, meaning both that it is fully staffed and its programs operate properly, is critical to maintaining the American food supply and feeding our nation for years to come. It is also critical to ensure that USDA's external-facing operations are running smoothly and that USDA farm programs are reaching all of our country's producers, which is where the outreach programs serve a crucial role. We know our nation's producers are getting older. As of 2017, more than 1/3 of America's farmers were over the age of 65 or older. The average age of producers in the U.S. is about 58, up from previous years in the agricultural census, a continuing trend we have been seeing for some time. In Connecticut 5, which is my district, 32% of farmers are 65 or older. So we are doing slightly better than the nation as a whole, but like the country, we are still in dire need of more new and beginning farmers. To strengthen the future of agriculture in America, it is important that USDA programs are accessible to all producers. Supporting our new and beginning farmers who are in their first 10 years of operation is key to cultivating the future of American agriculture. Encouraging more people from every background to go into farming is also key to ensuring we have a strong agricultural system for many decades to come. That is why USDA outreach to underserved communities like farmers of color, women, veterans, is critical to ensuring these communities have the resources they need to succeed. According to the 2017 Census of Agriculture, only 1.7% of all producers identified as American Indian or Alaska Native, 0.6% identified as Asian, 1.3% as Black or African American, 0.1% as Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, 0.8% as more than one race, and 3.3% as Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. Only about 11% of farmers served in the military, and about 36% of producers are women. We can and we must do better. I look forward to hearing more today about the programs that perform outreach to these communities, including the Outreach and Assistance for Socially Disadvantaged and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers programs, also known as 2501 program, and the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development programs, and how they support today's producers while cultivating the next generation of farmers. I want to thank again the members and the witnesses for joining us today. I sincerely look forward to hearing today's testimony about the importance of USDA outreach programs and the status of department operations issues like staffing, IT, and much more. Unfortunately, our ranking member from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon, is unable to join us today. We wish him well and hope that he is feeling better. I'm sure that he will be tuned in, and if he has questions, he will reach out. I now recognize Chairman Scott, if he's here for any opening comments that he would like to make. I don't believe the chairman's here, so I'll recognize the ranking member, Mr. Thompson, if you'd like to make any opening remarks.
Well, good morning, everybody. And thank you, Chairwoman Hayes, for hosting this hearing to discuss the miscellaneous title of the Farm Bill. And while Title 12 is literally a large title that includes a variety of provisions, we're focused today on a few select provisions that impact department operations and outreach. And as we prepare for the next Farm Bill, it is important to ensure young, beginning, socially disadvantaged, and veteran farmers know about and have access to USDA's programs and the benefits they provide. If we are serious about restoring a robust rural economy, it's important to evaluate the programs and outreach that impact our farmers, ranchers, foresters, and those living in rural America, or as I like to call it, essential America. Because everything that a family needs, and whether they live in a back a country lane or a densely populated city, those things that are essential come from that part of our nation and families, the hardworking families that provide it. Now, I look forward to hearing from USDA about how they are implementing some of the new positions and existing programs authorized in the 2018 Farm Bill. I'd like to thank Undersecretary Jacobs-Young and Administrator Ducheneaux for taking the time to be with us today. Dr. Jacobs-Young, I look forward to having you back before the committee to talk about the important work you are spearheading in the research, education, and economics mission area as well. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure there is ample time for questioning. Today we are joined by two witnesses from USDA. Our first witness is Dr. Shavonda Jacobs-Young, the Undersecretary for Research, Education, and Economics, or RE, and Chief Scientist at USDA. Prior to being confirmed as RE Undersecretary, Dr. Jacobs-Young served in various roles at USDA for 2 decades, including most recently as Administrator for USDA's Agricultural Research Services from 2014 to 2022. Dr. Jacobs-Young holds a BS, an MS, and a PhD from North Carolina State University, and was the first Black woman in the U.S. to earn a doctorate in wood and paper science. Our second witness is Mr. Zach Ducheneaux. Mr. Zach Ducheneaux, the Administrator of the Farm Service Agency at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Mr. Ducheneaux previously served as the Executive Director of the Intertribal Agricultural Council, an organization he worked at for over 2 decades. His family operates a 4th-generation ranch in the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation. Welcome to our witnesses today. We thank you so much for being here. We will now proceed to hearing your testimony. You will each have 5 minutes. The timer should be visible to you and will count down to 0, at which point your time has expired. Dr. Jacobs-Young, please begin when you are ready. You have 5 minutes for testimony.
Chairwoman Hayes, Ranking Member Bacon, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to come before you today to discuss Title 12 of the Farm Bill. As Undersecretary for the United States Department of Agriculture's Research, Education, and Economics mission area, I am excited to be here today to discuss REE's equity and outreach efforts. The REE mission area is rooted in partnerships. partnerships with technical assistance providers, including the cooperative extension system, that gives producers the tools they need to adapt as they feed the world, with institutions to support the next generation of agricultural scientists, and with Congress to ensure that decision makers have the tools they need to support farmers and ranchers across the country. Production agriculture requires constant innovation and adaptation as farmers and ranchers pursue climate-smart solutions to extreme weather, rural businesses seek markets, and underserved communities seek trusted partners to tackle systemic issues. Outreach and access to information underpins each of these objectives, and when appropriately resourced, REE is well positioned to be a partner in providing timely outreach, research, training, extension, and economic analysis to support informed decisions. The challenges faced in agriculture, human and animal health, food supply, and conservation are immense, and helping producers tackle these issues is critical. We must meet those challenges head-on and need a robust and diverse agricultural workforce to do so, and leverage existing partnerships to help achieve that outcome. First, this means ensuring that the REE workforce feels supported and able to carry out their mission to provide outreach to producers. REE faced significant staff losses over the past 5 years, and rebuilding that capacity is a key priority for the mission area. It has never been more critical to restore our employees' voices and support their efforts to advance the agency's mission. The President and Secretary have both been very clear. This new workforce must look like America, particularly to ensure that we are conducting equitable outreach to producers. Investing in inclusion, diversity, and inspiring future generations through formal and informal learning is critical for the future. As an agricultural scientist myself, I know that talent must be inspired, nurtured, and advanced across the country if the United States is to maintain its global leadership in science and technology. That's why Secretary Vilsack recently announced $250 million for minority-serving institutions that create career development opportunities in agriculture through the From Learning to Leading, cultivating the next generation of diverse food and agricultural professionals, and we call it the Next Gen program. This competitive program opportunity made possible through investments provided in the American Rescue Act, ARPA Section 1006, as amended by Section 22007 of the Inflation Reduction Act, is aimed at attracting, inspiring, and retaining diverse and talented students at minority-serving institutions for careers in food, agriculture, and related disciplines with an emphasis on federal government sector employment. USDA is dedicated to ensuring equity across its agencies and developing a diverse workforce. At REE, we know that supporting 1890 land-grant universities is vital to making strong, life-changing impact towards Secretary Vilsack's vision. In fiscal year 2021, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture administered 16 programs specifically for minority-serving institutions with over $250 million in funding and over $974 million in total grant awards to 1890 institutions in the past 5 years. The Beginning Farm and Rancher Development Program is a key component of NIFA's Title XII outreach. This program provides unique educational, training assistance, and outreach opportunities to help ensure that there will be a next generation of farmers and ranchers, regardless of age or production choice. In my time leading REE and in my 20 years in federal service, I've had the opportunity to travel across the country and meet with many of the people we serve. I've witnessed states in every region of the country and many of your districts meeting with the people you represent. They are optimistic about the future of agriculture, and so am I. President Biden, Secretary Vilsack, and REE are poised to support transformation in agriculture. We can meet and expand our commitment to leveling the playing field for farmers and ranchers as they work to feed the world. And I look forward to working with the subcommittee and full committee to support this mission.
Thank you. Mr. Ducheneaux, when you are ready, you can begin your testimony. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Hayes, Ranking Member Bacon, members of the subcommittee. It's truly an honor and a privilege to appear before this august body as your Farm Service Agency Administrator and to visit about the work that I have the further honor and privilege to lead. I am Zach Ducheneaux, and I have been in this role since February of 2021. Prior to this, I was the third generation on my family's ranch on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation, and I'm proud to have raised the fourth generation on the ranch, and even prouder to have recently welcomed the fifth generation to that same place where my ancestors lived and produced food since time immemorial. As a former rancher and a lifelong advocate for underserved people, I've approached my work at the FSA with a personal understanding of where we have room for improvement, and also some of the places where through partnerships we can double and triple the impact of our work, particularly in underserved communities. By bringing new producers and partners into the fold, we can move towards the goals that we all should share, to help producers access more and better markets, to build resilience to mitigate the market impacts that linger after what we hope is a once-in-a-generation pandemic, to quickly recover from the more frequent and more severe natural disasters, and to be part of a climate solution through a strength that is inherent in diversity of people, production, ideas, and solutions. I've had the good fortune to visit with our FSA employees across the country, and in every county office I've tried to take time to listen and gain more understanding of the passion that drives them as they work tirelessly to deliver our ad hoc pandemic and disaster assistance programs, to say nothing of their normal role in providing vital standing programs and services. I've witnessed firsthand many of our employees' commitment to providing equitable access to and delivery of USDA programs and services across rural, urban, and suburban communities. Looking ahead, my goal is to weave the ethic of equity into the DNA of the Farm Service Agency, so that it is organic in every interaction we have with producers, every program we deliver, and every service we provide. I would be doing a great disservice if I didn't use a portion of this time with you to thank our staff for those tireless efforts and to encourage all of you to do the same the next time when you're back in your district driving by one of our over 2,100 county offices. I'm pleased to share some of the work with you that we're doing now. First, equity starts at the top. That's why under the leadership and guidance of Secretary Vilsack, we have established an equity officer position in the administrator's office. Latrice Hill brings decades of experience to this role and significant expertise, and I look forward to working with her to make sure that my office is helping to guide the equitable review of every aspect of our work. In addition, we will also have 6 equity analysts working in the outreach office who will work with the equity officer and the outreach director to bring this important effort closer to the producers through immersion in each of our deputy administrator areas here at the Farm Service Agency. That outreach office also plays a critical role in coordinating and implementing agency-wide activities. These include not just our own outreach efforts, but also support technical assistance, education, and producer engagement efforts through millions of dollars in cooperative agreements, partnerships with stakeholder groups of all kinds. Our goal is to increase producer participation in our programs, with targeted outreach to underserved producers and communities, including women, veterans, minority, young and beginning producers who have not participated in or received limited and sometimes zero benefits from our programs. Currently at the direction of Congress, the office is at various stages of implementing historic levels of agreements, programs, and opportunities in the next fiscal year that will have hundreds of millions of dollars of impact. Of note, Section 1006 of the American Rescue Plan Act authorized over $1 billion for the Secretary of Agriculture to provide assistance and support for underserved producers through technical assistance and cooperative development training. From this funding, FSA has established the Increasing Land, Capital, and Market Access Program, providing up to $300 million to work with stakeholder groups and advance system-changing solutions to improve access to land, capital, and markets for underserved producers. Because our workforce should reflect the producers we serve and the next generation of leaders that we hope to cultivate, we have expanded our use of special hiring authorities and implemented several new recruitment efforts. This year, FSA is funding scholar and intern programs with targeted outreach to our 1890 and 1994 land-grant institutions, in addition to our existing Pathways program, where participation has also markedly increased in the last year. There are many more efforts underway that I hope to visit with you about, and I thank you again for the opportunity to be here in front of this body.
Thank you both so much for your testimony. At this time, members will be recognized for questioning in order of seniority. alternating between majority and minority members. You will each be recognized for 5 minutes in order to allow us to get to as many questions as possible. Please keep your microphones muted until you are recognized so that we can minimize background noise. I now recognize Chairman McGovern. You have 5 minutes for questioning. You may begin.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. And Chairwoman Hayes, again, thank you for convening this hearing. You know, Title 12 doesn't often get the spotlight, but it gets to the heart of how we can build a more just and inclusive food system. How ambitious we are about empowering farmers, especially those who are new to agriculture or have historically not had a seat at the table, will be a key measure of whether the next Farm Bill is a success. So I want to focus my time on USDA's outreach efforts, and I appreciate that both of our witnesses affirmed that it's a priority for the department. You know, in August, I hosted my annual district farm tour, visiting over a dozen Massachusetts farms over 2 days and hearing directly from our farmers. Something that came up at every farm was the challenge of applying to USDA or state programs. You know, farmers, especially small farmers, have so much on their plate, and even if they're perfect candidates for a USDA grant or cooperative agreement, even if they know about the existence of a program, they may not have the capacity to engage in the application process. So I have 2 questions for both of you. First, could you please elaborate on the ways that USDA is working to expand outreach efforts, especially to small, independent, diversified operations, beginning farmers, and socially disadvantaged farmers? And second, do you believe that there are holistic changes that we can incorporate into the next Farm Bill to expand program accessibility?
Thank you for the question, Representative McGovern. And yes, it is so important for us to be on the ground and working and witnessing the producers and learning from them what their highest priorities are. We've been very fortunate to receive funding from Congress that has supported us in our efforts to increase the amount of technical assistance and outreach that we give to these small farmers. I just spent last Monday of last week, I did a small farmers conference in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, talking to a group of small farmers and learning from them what their highest priorities are. And you are absolutely correct. And these organizations that we're partnering with new funding are helping us reach out to those farmers to learn more about the programs and services that we have at USDA and providing that technical assistance and bridging the gap between their day-to-day experiences and the services that they are eligible for. And so I think that is it's a very important point, and I know the administrator here with his agency are doing a lot of work on the ground, and so I'm going to turn the floor to Zach.
Thank you. Very good question. My background is in outreach and technical assistance, and the reality is many of our stakeholders do not have the capacity to leverage the trust that they have built in their communities of stakeholders to help them get into our programs. You're exactly right. Our programs often miss folks that are ideally situated to be those that we serve. One of the things that we're doing to address that is to engage in multi-year agreements with these cooperators so that they know that they will be able to bring that staff on that can help us with that outreach effort, retain them, and train them as we work to meet producers where they're at the agency. We're streamlining our processes. We're reducing the size of our farm loan application, which is critical to producers being able to get in there and participate meaningfully. And we're exploring all of the flexibility that we can within all of our programs in order to try to meet the need of those particular producers who we should be reaching out more to serve.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairman McGovern. I now recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson. You have 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Administrator Ducheneaux, thank you so much for your leadership and for your staff. I love, as I travel around the country from time to time, stop in cold calls at FSA offices. I don't really introduce myself till I find out what they think. But then I always take the time to thank them for what they do. All of our USDA offices, I appreciate that staff. I'd like to discuss the role of the FSA county committees. From my perspective, my constituents and people I talk with across the country generally like having some of these decisions made at the local level than relying on a state office or worse yet, Washington, having to adjudicate issues that they may have. Can you speak to the role the FSA county committees play in delivering FSA programs? And do you have thoughts on the Equity Commission's recommendation that USDA should consider termination of the county committee system?
Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson. You know, as I've gone around the country in the last year and a half, I've been a staunch proponent of participation in this opportunity. To me, in the county committee system, I see an opportunity for our producers to be meaningfully a part of the process of delivery of our programs and services. The challenge is in some of our communities where producers don't have historic access to those programs, they're not able to get on the ballot and get selected to serve there. We're working with our counterparts in the Deputy Administrator for Field Operations to examine how we can improve outreach to producers so that they are aware of that opportunity to serve and share in that. I don't think that exists anywhere else in the federal government. So it's really a unique opportunity that we should capitalize on. With respect to the Equity Commission's recommendation, I haven't seen it verbatim, but I understand that it asks about an analysis of what a world without county committees would look like. And the work that the Equity Commission is engaged in is at the direction of Congress. And their job is to take an outside look at the realities of the delivery of services all across the department. And I think they're even reaching broader than that, looking across the federal government to see how the work in equity can be amplified. Given that, and the fact that it's chartered by Congress, we will give every recommendation that they make due consideration and try to find a way to improve the work that we do to get at the ultimate end goal for all of us, which is equitable participation, equitable delivery of services, and equitable representation on the county committees.
Yeah, which I see enough eliminating county committees, that eliminates opportunities for people, more diverse individuals to be a part of those positions. You concentrate power at state level and here in Washington is just counterintuitive to what this, I find it hard to believe the Equity Commission came up or even talking about that as a proposal. I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize the role that land-grant universities play in creating the next generation of agriculturalists and providing outreach to the agriculture industry. I had the privilege over the past couple of weeks of visiting a couple of schools, one on the East Coast, one in Texas, and it's just impressive, the amount of the quality of individuals, not just in the faculty, but certainly with the students, graduate and undergraduate. So while some states have only one land-grant university, other states have 2 or 3. Undersecretary, can you talk about how these land-grant universities coordinate with USDA to ensure producers in every corner of every state can be reached?
Absolutely. In recognizing our partnership with USDA and the land-grant university system, we were actually created to be partners, long-term partners, over 150 years ago. And the big jewel we have in the United States that I've talked with many international colleagues about is the Extension Service. So we conduct research. ARS, NIFA provides funding for research. The land-grant universities produce a lot of research, and the Extension Service and the partners and the cooperators that they have take all of that research and they translate it into tools that people can use. And so it is a beautiful system when it's properly resourced and it works, that we have the full supply chain of conducting the research and disseminate it to the producers at every corner of this country.
Yeah, it seems like while some program and research stays within the halls of the university at the end of the day, that's not agriculture research. it almost without exception, goes for the greater good. So,
Right.
thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal. You have 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Jacobs-Young and Administrator Ducheneaux, for your testimony today. And thank you for the great work you do for our country day in and day out. USDA offers so many beneficial programs and grants to farmers and ranchers. These programs aren't very helpful if people don't know about them. I'm glad to hear about the work being done through the Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Development Program. It is obviously very vital that we prepare the next generation of farmers, especially for beginning underserved and veteran farmers. However, it is equally important that existing farmers and ranchers are also aware of the programs and resources available at the USDA. Administrator Ducheneaux, Section 12306 of the 2018 Farm Bill provided additional support for veteran farmers across USDA programs, including FSA down payment loans, reduced interest rates on guaranteed loans, and increased coverage under the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish Program, ELAP. I know that's a mouthful. Earlier this year, FSA issued a final rule implementing some of those adjustments. Can you please speak to any improved outcomes that you have seen for veterans as a result? And are there other ways that Congress and USDA can better support veteran farmers, producers?
Yes, sir, and thank you for the question. You know, this one is really near and dear to me. My father was a veteran of the Marine Corps, and I've had a chance to work with a lot of the veteran farmers and ranchers across the country. Worked very closely with Gary Mattson at the National Veteran Farmer Coalition. One of the challenges that we have with regard to serving underserved populations like veterans, minorities, and what have you, we don't have any programs within FSA that are specifically designed for their unique circumstances. We will set aside some of our funding for those programs, but they still have to come in the door and qualify just like everybody else on the same terms as everybody else. And with respect to veterans, sir, you know, we did make those announcements about the ELAP program, and I'm not going to go through the whole jargon there that you did, but I agree that's a challenging mouthful to say. We had a veteran call us, he's a Vietnam veteran, and he said, you did this additional benefit to veterans, and this is in our forage hauling that we announced last year to help producers mitigate the impacts of the drought. He said, but I'm being told I don't qualify. So I thought, wow, that seems like a really simple fix. So I went to work and I worked with OGC and the department, and it turns out we can't fix that. There's a statutory prohibition that limits our ability to address veteran issues in those programs. They have to be a veteran within the last 10 years, have to be no more than 10 years in farming or brand new to farming. So for some of the existing veterans, it's really challenging to participate, but we guide our staff to treat everybody as though we need them in the building to work. We're pushing our boundaries for inclusion and not exclusion. So we were able to find other ways to help veterans who don't meet those three criteria in that section of the code.
Thank you. Administrator Ducheneaux, can you also speak to the current outreach FSA does to existing farmers to make them aware of the programs and the resources offered by USDA, especially after a major piece of legislation like the Farm Bill is signed into law? And how can Congress help improve this outreach?
Absolutely. As we have started our work with the guidance of Secretary Vilsack, we were told to engage with stakeholders early and often. And as you saw through the pandemic assistance programs and the emergency relief program that we've administered in the last year and a half, we did reach out to stakeholders very early, got them involved in the process for building those programs. And I think that we've demonstrated that there's a lot of satisfaction there. That doesn't mean that all the work is done. As I mentioned in my oral testimony, there's a lot of work to do yet. We continue to look for opportunities to engage with Congress and our stakeholder groups to improve our outreach and get it down there at a more granular level.
Thank you. I'm going to ask this last question, but I know I'm running out of time. So if you could submit something in writing, I would appreciate it. Administrator Ducheneaux, when conducting outreach to individuals, whether farmers, ranchers, or someone else seeking assistance from USDA, do you have a program to employ someone like promotores that serve Latino communities? I don't know if you're familiar with that concept.
Thank you, Mr. Carbajal.
We'll submit
Mr.
that.
Ducheneaux, if you can submit that question, we'll make sure that you get it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Baird, who is joining us virtually. If you can unmute and ask your questions, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. And I really appreciate Undersecretary Jacobs-Young for her new appointment and look forward to working with her in the future. So my question really deals with the fact that she and I are both graduates of the undergraduate land grant system and fully understand and appreciate and recognize the importance this system plays in educating our next generation of agriculture and training our next generation of farmers and ranchers. So, Madam Undersecretary, are there any specific programs or topics mentioned under the Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Development Program that you would like to see prioritized in the 2023 Farm Bill as we work through that?
Thank you, Representative Baird, and thank you for taking time to meet with me earlier this month. The Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Development Program, as you all are aware, is so critically important to helping us create an agriculture enterprise that is climate smart, robust, culturally responsive, equitable, and most importantly, resilient, and enables our farmers and producers to be economically successful. The Beginners Farmers and Ranchers Development Program has been critically important in recognizing, we just had a question about the veterans, recognizing that there are many who are serving in the military, who return to their homelands, and the rural economies have a disproportionately number of military folks represented in the military. And so we want to be able to help those folks come back to the United States. If they want to return to farming, we want to help them. And if they are new to farming, we want to help them in that case too. So there are some special programs that support the veterans, that support underrepresented groups and organizations. And so we want to make sure that we have a 5% set aside for our veterans so that we can make sure that we can support them to come back into farming or to enter farming. We have NIFA's Ag Vet program that supports farming no matter how many years they've been in farming. So that's a different program than Beginning Farmers and Ranchers. And then we have the AgriAbility program that really is important for helping our disabled farmers stay on the land and continue to be successful. And that helps provide assistive technologies. In all these cases, being able to help with financial planning, and overall just to increase economic, environmental, and social sustainability of those farms. And so we're just very thankful, and we're here to support Congress as you prepare the next Farm Bill with technical assistance and being able to provide any information that's needed to draft that new important piece of legislation.
I really appreciate your perspective on that, and I do think it's important for helping our veterans that are interested in this kind of a program and maybe agriculture to move back into the civilian world. And this kind of a program can be very helpful. And I think from their perspective, being out on the land and being in agriculture would be a real asset. So I certainly appreciate your perspective on that. And I appreciate your willingness to work with us to make sure we get that portion of the next Farm Bill correct. So thank you very much, Undersecretary. I'd like to Administrator Ducheneaux then. and talk about this outreach program for beginning farmers and ranchers. And you know, the 2018 Farm Bill, as you've already mentioned, created to create a team of state beginning farmer and rancher coordinators. So could you elaborate on the implementation of that program and how you feel that's going?
Yes, sir. We've got a beginning farmer and rancher development coordinator, or beginning farmer and rancher coordinator, rather, in the agency. Sarah Campbell is doing good work working across the department to make sure that we are coordinating efforts with our friends at NEFA, rural development, and what have you. The work that is so critical to beginning farmers and ranchers is getting them in the door, getting them that first interaction. And oftentimes, we don't have the chance to get that second impression. Many of these folks need that second impression, so it's important that we develop the capacity of our cooperators so that they can stay out there and advocate on our behalf.
You know, I really think you hit on a key issue there. Sometimes looking at the Farm Service Agency or some of the programs that are available, and if you go on the website, you could get lost. So I think it's really beneficial that we have people to help some of these beginning young farmers get started and get active. And, you know, one of the things that I see going on in the present time is some of these folks that want to know where their food's coming from. So it's the only opportunity that I've seen in my years to have young farmers get involved, because they can go into this specialty, either foods or specialty crops, provided to a local restaurant or something. So
The gentleman's time
FSA's
has
help
expired.
there would be good. I'm sorry. Thank you. And I yield back.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beard. Although I was enjoying listening.
Didn't aim to bother you.
I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Panetta. You have 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that, and always appreciate the questioning of my good friend, our statement of my good friend, Mr. Baird from Indiana. Look, let me thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this hearing today. Obviously, we've had a lot of hearings on the Farm Bill, and this type of discussion on how the USDA and its agencies execute congressional policies and interact with our consumers, with our farmers, with our ranchers, and our partners is absolutely critical. And I think it's been made clear just from the short time of this hearing that our two witnesses today represent two of the agencies at USDA that really are at the heart and soul of that type of implementation, from training and transitioning our beginning farmers and ranchers to staffing our USDA offices around the country, to reducing food waste. The leadership and strategic direction that our witnesses provide to the American agriculture is absolutely paramount. And so we obviously know that there's been challenges, especially with staffing during the pandemic, but also the difficulties of setting up a new administration, to providing adequate technical assistance to local FSA offices, to supporting many of the programs that this Congress and administration has rolled out. But those growing pains can be positive if we continue to work through it, and if we continue to have discussions like this, where we know that we have to work together, and we know that we have to listen to the people we represent, especially our farmers, farm workers, and producers, and what they need and what they expect of the USDA. Now, obviously, when we talk about equity and outreach, we got to talk about everybody responsible for producing our agriculture, our farmers and our farm workers, our essential farm workers. And Mr. Ducheneaux, first of all, let me congratulate you on your excellent decision on your recent choice for chief of staff. Obviously, that's something that's going to help not just you, not just your office, but going to help all of American agriculture. So good on you for that. But I also understand that the FSA is standing up a pilot program, and part of that work will help us address our labor shortage, something that I think everybody in this hearing, everybody on the Ag Committee, and a lot of people in USDA understand. And so we got to improve our labor standards for our farm workers, especially. Can you talk about this program, this pilot program, that is obviously deals with the labor shortage, but also improves our standards for our farm workers?
Yes, sir. And as you're well aware, there are people that know a lot more about this than I, but I'm very well prepared by those folks. You know, as we travel the countryside and look at the realities of our food system that have been so clearly laid bare by the pandemic, we saw grocery stores that didn't have shelves full of meat when there are cows grazing 5 miles away. We saw produce shelves empty. And this administration has really taken an interest in addressing what causes those shortages, because food shortage is a national security issue. One of those that we hear about every time we go out and talk with a producer or a stakeholder group is farm labor. The lack of farm labor is a challenge. Rather than sit back and gnash our teeth about the program, the Secretary went to work and found a solution. And he's working with our farm worker groups to identify ways to streamline and assist with getting H-2A visa workers in the country to do this work. And we're using $65 million of ARPA funding to get at that through these stakeholder agreements. We had 3 listening sessions yesterday to ensure that we're getting it as close to right as possible. But it's important to note another of the strengths of this administration is that we don't mind making an adjustment if we don't get it exactly right the first time. And we've demonstrated that in the last year and a half as we roll out some of our other innovative programs in the disaster realm.
Look, I think you know the H-2A program right now, unfortunately, is the only game in town when it comes to ag labor. And so I appreciate you leaning into this issue. And I also appreciate the fact that you understand the emergency aspect of this issue, and that basically, you know, our producers, our farmers need those farm workers. And obviously we have to ensure the proper standards for those farm workers as well. So thank you for your work on this. And more importantly, thank you for your continued work on this. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Panetta. I now recognize the gentleman from Tennessee joining us on the platform, Mr. Desjardins. You have 5 minutes for questioning. Please unmute and begin your questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Administrator and Undersecretary, I just was curious whether you had a strategy to deal with the crisis at the southern border in terms of the influx of several million illegal immigrants, many who will be applying for SNAP benefits under either asylum or because they're under 18.
Thank you, Congressman Desjardins. It's a good and important question in these times. I think it's important to note that people with full bellies are satisfied and happy and contribute to society. And when we have folks that are hungry, the American people have always stood up and helped to feed them. And it's no less important to feed those folks that are trying to get into this country to be part of the system than it is to feed those that are overseas or in our own rural and urban communities.
Okay, do you have any kind of numbers yet? We're getting ready to write a farm bill and we have to fund the program. Do you have any numbers for us in terms of how many asylum seekers there are or how many children that we'll be needing to feed?
Sir, I do not have any of those numbers, but I do have faith in the American farmers and ranchers to be able to stand up to the challenge and feed them.
Okay, who could get that number for me? Because we've gone through this a few times in this subcommittee, and you agree that it is going to put a strain on the program, correct?
Sir, I don't have the numbers, and that is a little bit outside of the bailiwick of the Farm Service Agency, but I can work with our friends at the Food and Nutrition Service to ensure that you get those numbers.
Okay, Undersecretary, do you have anything that you'd like to add to my concerns regarding this problem?
I'd like to add that I think that we should definitely take this back to the department and work to submit some responses for the record. Administrator Ducheneaux and myself, you know, we are not the experts in this area. However, we have lots of experts at the department, and we'd be happy to provide some responses for the record.
I would appreciate that. Thank you both for your attendance, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Descharlet. I now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Lawson. You have 5 minutes. Please unmute and begin your questioning.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to the committee. And I'm kind of question was sent around some of the things that Congressman Thompson talks about. Veterans make up 7% of the agricultural producers, where Florida leading as one of the top 5 states for producers with military service. The 2018 Farm Bill amended the definition of veteran farmers to give them the same benefit as beginning farmers and ranchers. Madam Undersecretary, have these updates to Section 12306 increased the enrollment and participation of veteran producers in the USDA program?
Thank you for your question, sir. So one of the things I know from the missionary that I am the undersecretary for in terms of the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, we have significant investments in terms of support for our veteran farmers. And it is for those who are beginning farmers and ranchers, and it is support for those who have been in the farming and ranching industry for quite some time, and working to ensure that we can expand awareness and access and remove barriers to our programs and services. We have been working with many different cooperative organizations to really just help echo some of the work that we're conducting both internal to USDA with our land grant partners and our extension service. And so we're pulling all hands on deck to be able to reach the people who can benefit from these services. Because with the status of our farmers' average age 58, that is, some of us resemble that remark. We recognize that if we don't have a pipeline primed and prepared to come onto the lands and continue to grow the food and to raise the animals and provide the fiber and fuel that we all enjoy, which enables me to sit here at this table today, that we will be in trouble in terms of protecting the food supply for our country. And so the veterans are an incredibly important piece of this puzzle. And so we are more than excited about some of the new investments that Congress has entrusted us with, and we want to do the best we can to ensure that all people know about what's available to them and that is as efficient and effective as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. And earlier, you mentioned about land grant universities as a lifeline for agricultural research, innovation, and development. These institutions educate the next generation of farmers, ranchers, and citizens, and from the and really form the backbone of our nation's network of agricultural extension and experiments. The chairman of this committee, and I work with him a great deal in providing scholarship funding to HBCUs to educate farmers and to get young farmers involved in agriculture. And so the question would be, the Agriculture Youth Organization coordinators were hired in 2019 to build awareness among youth in agriculture and engage with land grant universities. Undersecretary, could you expand upon what sort of projects the coordinators have been engaged in with land grant universities to make this successful?
So, sir, I would like a clarification. Are we talking about the liaisons to the 1890 institutions?
Yes. How have they played a role, since we're talking about the research that the land grant institution are doing, and then at the same time, the chairman of the department, my time might run out, but of agriculture have provided scholarships for them to educate young people at HBCUs in order for them to get a bigger interest in farming and stay in the agriculture industry.
Yep, absolutely. So I know in the interest of time, so on last Tuesday, I had an opportunity to visit Alcorn State University and meet with our 1890 scholars, our USDA 1890 scholars. And many of them are off on their way to a professional career in agriculture. And I wish I had more time because I would tell you about some of the exciting things that we shared, and that was all worked through the 1890 liaison who is stationed there at Alcorn State University that helps recruit and retain and helps train and help provide internship opportunities by working back with the department. So those coordinators are extremely important. Those liaisons, we call them the 1890 liaisons, are critically important for helping us prepare the next generation of students out of the 1890 institutions.
Madam Chair, as I yield back, I think this is something that we need a little bit more elaboration on it in your committee. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. And I would agree, 5 minutes is not enough time to hear about all of the exciting things that are happening at these land-grant institutions. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cloud. You have 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Appreciate it. Thank you all for being here today, and I just wanted to start off by thanking you, Administrator Ducheneaux, for helping us with the redfish issue we had after the Texas freeze. I know there's still an issue going on with the pricing issue, but first of all, I just wanted to say I was visiting the farms 3 weeks ago. Things are still going, and so really appreciate the help with getting that wrapped into ELAP. Now, my understanding is there's still some discrepancy on the pricing issue, and we're waiting, I guess, on the FSA to kind of respond at this point and to give their analysis. Do you know when we could expect that? Is there a timeline on that?
Yes, so the redfish producers exercise their appeal rights to go to the National Appeals Division to seek a determination on whether or not we use the right information. We've got that NAD appeal determination this summer, and we're working on getting back to Mr. Ekstrom and the redfish folks here in the next couple weeks with our answer.
Okay, well, appreciate it. Thanks so much. You know, when I'm talking to our folks in the ag industry, the thing that I hear most often, other than things on, hey, next year's Farm Bill, still have to do with staffing issues in Texas in the FSA offices. And so I was wanting to see if we can get an update. I asked for an update, and then we had a phone call, and then we were going to get some, you know, we were expecting a letter would be provided at that phone call, and we hadn't received any information yet from that. So I was just wondering, you know, where the bottleneck is at the moment. Is it in recruiting? Is it training? Do we have retirements? You know, what's taking, I guess, in the perspective of our ag workers, what's taking so long to get this issue solved?
Well, as of just yesterday, we were at 95% fully staffed, and when you consider that that's over 10,000 employees just in the Farm Service Agency, there is some attrition as folks go out. It takes time to onboard. So honestly, a 5% gap isn't that bad when you think about the...
Is everybody back in the office working?
Everybody is back in the office. We continue to monitor local COVID realities and take steps to keep folks safe, but every office is open. You may not get to see the smiling face in a few places because we will wear a mask when there's community spread, but the offices are back open. The biggest challenge that we see in retaining staff is the workload doesn't match the compensation. We're asking our folks to do yeoman's work, working overtime, and oftentimes the wages that they receive in exchange for that time don't match the responsibility or the importance of the work, sir.
Okay. Are you looking into ways to automate processes and as well, and kind of some of that can be done through technology and updating old systems? You know, I know government's notably, and this isn't just your agency, this is everywhere, just notably behind when it comes to...
I'm a big fan of automation, but I'm bridging that generation where the folks older than me, they want a person in front of them to talk to, and that's critical that we maintain that county office presence. But at the same time, if we take advantage of technology, we can streamline the processes. We're taking our farm loan application, for example, down from around 35 pages, a lot of which doesn't matter anyway, down to about 12 pages and getting to the meat of the issue so that we can better use not only the producer's time, but also our employees' time. And we're taking the lessons we learned in deploying the Emergency Livestock Relief Program and the Emergency Relief Program Phase 1, where we're using information we've already got to deliver those programs to producers out there in the countryside.
One other challenge I heard that I wanted to bring up was just the issue of cross-agency jurisdictions that happen a lot. There are 3 or 4 examples, and maybe we can get you some of these in writing. But for example, the Plains cotton farmers said they would get a form from the ERP in the mail, and when they would try to verify the information for accuracy, FSA would say that RMA or your insurance provider had to make that corrected information, but then they go to the RMA, and RMN says, no, that's FSA's, and so, it leaves the farmer stuck in limbo there. And we have, 3 or 4 examples of other things like that where it's cross-agency jurisdiction, which, ends up being the farmer versus the bureaucracy. At least that's how they feel it, and just trying to get an answer and move forward for them is difficult sometimes.
Yes, sir. And as with any new approach, there are growing pains, and we're interested in seeing all of those realities and making adjustments as we go out. But if you'd get me the list of those, I'll make sure that we get some attention to them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Cloud. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Brown. You have 5 minutes. Please unmute and begin your questioning.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hayes, for hosting this timely hearing as Congress continues to prepare for Farm Bill reauthorization. Many of the programs and agency-wide initiatives that we have discussed in hearings this year rely on strong departmental operations and effective outreach. It is vital that we continue to support these efforts. So, Dr. Jacobs-Young, how does the USDA measure the impact of its outreach grants and the activities those grants fund beyond the numbers of producers reached, number of grants, and dollars awarded?
Thank you for your question. And most recently, Secretary Vilsack announced a $250 million Next-Gen program. And in that program, where we are working specifically with minority-serving institutions, we are asking in each one of those applications for robust evaluation plans. We also plan to stay engaged with each one of the applicants who are selected for awards throughout the tenure of those award processes. And so we want to be able to work cooperatively with the minority-serving institutions that will receive the $250 million in funding. So now let's talk a little bit about, the question about, so how do we know we've been successful? I think that's what I hear you saying. And one of the things that I would love to see as an agency administrator when I was administrator for the Agricultural Research Service, continuing to look at our demographics. And the higher you get in in executive and what we call the GS scale in government, the numbers decreased. So let me say we see a lot of diversity at the certain GS level, and then the higher you go, we start to see those numbers reduced. And so for me as an administrator, or now as undersecretary, to me the success is when I look across my staff and I look at my staff at all levels and they look like America. And so that's why I think it's so important, Congresswoman, that our youth get to see people that look like me, that get to see people who look like the administrator, and that get to see people who look like America in leadership roles so that we can encourage them to continue. And so whether I just talked to a group of 5th graders this Monday in Denver. Let's just say talking to a whole room of 5th graders is a bit challenging, but Congresswoman Hayes has been in this position before, I'm sure. Keeping their attention was a full-time job. But I hope that those kids there were a group of brown, our lovely, lovely kids of color. And I hope that they walked away with an idea that they can be me, because I can't be here forever. And I'm hoping that if I convinced even 1 or 2 of those children to continue their education in agriculture, and at least 75% of them to continue to go on to college and to grad school, then I would have been successful. But I will see it and I will know it when I see it in the numbers that we experience in our agencies across the country.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ducheneaux, in your testimony, you mentioned about the work of the equity officer, equity analysis. analyst and the Justice 40 initiative in combating discrimination within the agriculture sector. What metrics are you using to assess the success of these positions and efforts?
Thank you very much for the question. As a former executive director of an organization that participated in some of these agreements, I can tell you that it is rigorously and frequently that the USDA asks for information about the success and outcomes for our cooperators, oftentimes more than their capacity will allow. It's why capacity development for our cooperators is so important. But if you want to look at an example of how that can happen and how federal investment in knowing better information, you need to look no further than the National Ag Statistics Service. In 2002, they made a concerted effort to get out there and do a better count of Indian country. The Navajo Nation went from one producer magically to tens of thousands of producers because they made the effort and they got out there and tracked it. So that federal investment leveraged into better information, just like the information with the cooperators will. Many of our cooperators who have been able to develop that additional capacity also have stepped now into tracking outcomes and program participation on behalf of the federal government. For instance, tracking loan participation rates, loan success rates, conservation program success rates, and even import investment leveraging of capital.
Well, thank you. I see, Madam Chair, that my time has expired. So with that, I want to thank the committee for their testimony before us today, and I will yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. I'll just say that you're speaking my language when you're talking about ag programs in schools. I would like to see more of those programs offered to students much sooner, much younger, because we can capture their creativity and their innovation, and like you said, they'll begin to believe that they can too be engaged in agriculture and see themselves in these roles. I now recognize the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Kamak. You have 5 minutes. Please unmute and begin your questioning.
All right. Well, thank you, Chairwoman Hayes, Ranking Member Bacon, and I'll just jump right into it. Thank you to you both for appearing before the committee today. Administrator Ducheneaux, thank you for highlighting the work of the Farm Service Agency. Now, as you continue to explore ways to serve producers, how is the department thinking about ways to improve technology needed to ease the burdens related to reporting and program enrollments, et cetera? That's been a common comment and complaint that we have heard amongst our FSA folks.
We get that same complaint as we go out and talk to producers in the countryside and our county office staff as well. It's every program that we roll out, we have to do a Paperwork Reduction Act and a time burden analysis. And we're working to bring those down and working to streamline our programs. And we're really taking the lessons learned, as I mentioned previously, from the emergency relief program, where producers receive that pre-populated form and are able to sign and verify, commit to the 2 years of linkage that were required in the statute, and receive the benefits that they're entitled to. In the emergency livestock relief program, we actually used information that we had using the livestock forage disaster program and acreage reports, and simply made a payment to producers that were eligible for that program with no paper transactions at all. And the challenge is to do so in a way that maintains program integrity, because it's important to fulfill our role as stewards of the taxpayer dollar as we deliver these programs and ensure that they get where Congress intended them to go as we do this. The livestock forage program is one that we're looking specifically at. How can we automate that so that when the drought monitor triggers that disaster assistance, we should be able to automatically make the payment like we did with the emergency livestock relief program. So we're trying to find that balance between streamlining but maintain program integrity, because we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of the money.
Right. No, thank you for that. And while we're on the subject of FSA, Administrator, the county committees, as you know, are a direct link between the farm community and the Department of Agriculture. And my colleague, Ranking Member Thompson, brought up earlier, USDA's Equity Commission recently recommended that USDA seriously consider termination of the FSA County Committee system to, quote, design a more equitable alternative for all farmers. Now, I'm concerned by the many claims and reporting that county committees are responsible for minority farmers not being able to access loans. That's serious. But it's also my understanding that the county committee does not have any say in the loan approval process. Is that the case? Yes?
That is the case.
Okay, so they have no say in the approval process. So as administrator, then what are you doing to ensure that the Equity Commission members have an educated understanding about what the county committees can and cannot do?
That is a very good question. And we have,
Thank you.
we have participated at every opportunity with the members of the Equity Commission. But we have to understand that we're working to overcome decades and generations of when that was actually the case, when county committee members did weigh in on loan applications. Those are very recent changes in the grand spectrum of time of this. But the county committees are integral in the delivery of the billions of dollars of programs that we administer annually. They're responsible for making determinations about producer eligibility.
Right.
And making assessments about prices in that particular region. So it's important that they're truly representative of those that are producing.
Well, and I'm running short on time, so I'm sorry to cut you off a little bit there. When was the change made?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I will get it to you. It's sometime in the last few decades.
Okay, so I mean, decades. There's clearly been time to educate these committee members about the fact that they are not final say or part of the approval process. So it kind of seems to me that USDA with this recommendation is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I got to tell you, I'm speaking with producers all up and down my state of Florida, and we have just been battered by the worst hurricane in Florida's history. As you know, Florida is home to over 300 specialty crops, and it is the #2 economic driver of our state. So we have real serious challenges, and our FSA committees, those county committees, are a key part to the agriculture committee as a whole, but they will be a major component to recovery. So I think the last thing that they want to hear is that the FSA or USDA in the days and weeks after this disaster is possibly going to do a wholesale reconfiguration of how these agencies they've relied on will work moving forward based on, and I'm just going to call a spade here, it seems like virtue signaling and some woke ideology. But I would like to continue this conversation. I know my time has expired, so in the interest of doing what's best for these county committees and our producers around the country, I'll follow up with you later. But thank you, and Madam Chairwoman, I yield back.
I'd appreciate the follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kamek. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Before I begin my questions, I first want to say to Administrator Ducheneaux, you spoke to my heart when you said people with full bellies contribute to our communities, because that is really where I see my role in this work. Yesterday, as many of you know, the White House convened a conference on hunger, and farmers will be critical to any plan that we have moving forward to address hunger and food security issues in this country. So I think that this hearing is both timely and relevant to the work that has to be done. I've said since the day I came to Washington, hungry kids don't learn. I know that, and that can extend to any other community on any other topic, but we must be invested in feeding people in this country. And the idea that we have so many farmers and ranchers locally who are not being utilized is something that we have to really look at differently. Dr. Jacobs-Young, in my district, only 9% of farmers are younger than 35, and 1/3 are older than 65. Which aligns closely to the long-term trends. So I know how critical it is, as I said before, to get more younger beginning farmers involved in agriculture and to share the importance of programs like Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Development Programs. What changes to the 2018 Farm Bill have improved access, and has NIFA received more applications as a result? If not, what should we be doing differently as we move forward?
Thank you for the question, Chairwoman Hayes. So the number of applications received by the Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Development Program is one that I will have to provide following this hearing today. I do want to talk a little bit about, in your home state, some of the work that's been happening with the Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Development Program, working with the University of Connecticut Extension Service. And they're working with a program called the Solid Ground. And I love I don't know if we want it so solid. We need it a little bit aerated, soft, and tilled at some points. But Solid Ground program where they are working with the beginning farmers to do expert training. They're setting up peer networks, that they are doing things like technology awareness, building cold bots, which helps them after they harvest their production to be able to reduce the amount of loss that is experienced. And so really being able to introduce them to some of the technology. And then and importantly as well, they're talking about farmer wellness. And this is something I had a chance to talk to the small farmers about last Monday, because if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't look at our diet and our nutrition and we're not healthy, we're not going to be at our best either. And so this program also looks at farmer wellness, and so I think that those are some very important facets. What I will say is we just want to thank you all for the support that we've received for this program, because it has been so helpful and it's engaged so many across the country to really do this important work of making sure that those who venture into farming can be successful. And so that is something that I just want to thank you all for your support with that, and we will follow up with those numbers for the record.
Thank you for that, and you can take me down a rabbit hole on this one, because I've seen at many of our VOAG training programs where young people who were interested in technology didn't realize that drone research could be contributed to agriculture, and it was a way that they can have gainful employment in the field, and just so many different areas. So very excited to hear you shout out my state. In my last minute, I have a question for you, Mr. Ducheneaux. As of 2017, only 5% of farmers in the U.S. were Black, Latino, Hispanic, Asian, Native, or Pacific Islander, or identified with multiple races. In my district, it's only about 2%. Without reaching these communities, who make up more than 40% of our country, we are going to really struggle to address the need for more farmers. Given the urgency of this issue, how does the Farm Services Agency and the 2501 program work together to support farmers of color and farmers with prior military service?
Thank you, ma'am. All things being equal over the span of time, we wouldn't need to be sitting here talking about equity. But the fact of the matter is that nearly 40% of this country is minority. Less than 12%, actually 11 point something percent, are minority farmers. So there's tremendous inequity just in who's farming. But if you take a closer look at the numbers, there's a disparity of about 2% in farm program payments between farmers that aren't farmers of color and farmers that are. We have to reach those farmers and at least bring equity to the proportion of program participation and the proportion of existing farmers while we work to increase opportunity for producers so that our farming population can better represent our national population.
Thank you, sir. We all benefit when we have honest conversations and commit to finding solutions to these problems. And I think that's where we have to go from here. Seeing no other witnesses on the platform or in the committee room, I will now, I probably should have yielded back from my question. I don't know. Usually I'm over there. I want to thank our witnesses for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate your time and expertise. I will ask that there's so many other things that I would have loved to hear about. We had some questions from Mr. Carbajal, Desjardins, Mr. Cloud, Ms. Kamek, and even myself that I would love to follow up on. This really requires a much more extensive conversation, because I truly believe that we have the ability and the capacity to close these gaps and do better moving forward. Your insights on the 2018 Farm Bill provisions related to USDA Department operations and outreach programs, and the impact of COVID-19 on the department and its programs, and everything else mentioned here today will inform us as we begin the process of drafting the 2023 Farm Bill. We've really just seen how incredibly important our agricultural sector is, not only to our country, but to the global economy. We've seen that amplified over the last few years, and I think more people are hyper aware of the role that local farmers and ranchers play. And as legislators, I think we are hyper aware of what we have to do to support this industry. Working together, we can ensure that the structure and operations of the department serves farms and ranches of all sizes. That is very important to me because in my state of Connecticut, I deal with many smaller farmers who one bad season, one missed crop, one, bad market, and they're out of business for good. So we really have to make sure that our programs reach farmers of all sizes, from the largest that we have in our country to the smallest family farms that we serve. So I thank you again, Undersecretary Jacobs-Young and Administrator Ducheneaux, for your expertise in these areas and your commitment to the work that you do. I think that your presence here really speaks volumes just about the subject of this hearing, that we are trying as a country and as an administration to expand our efforts, to reach into other communities, to close the gaps that we know exist. So it's very important. It's very important that you are representing the department and that you bring such unique and varied experiences and that your work will help guide and inform us moving forward. I guess that serves as my closing statement. Our ranking member isn't here, but my ranking member isn't here, but the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Thompson, is here. So I welcome you to give closing remarks if you would like.
Well, no, just thank you so much for your service, your continued service, and your leadership. This was a good hearing, good information. One of the things I'd like to follow up with you on this entire issue is I would love to have the data from the root cause analysis that USDA must have done in order to come to the conclusion for the actions that they've taken. Really using the data to look at what are the variables of why some succeed and some don't succeed, even in just having access. Is it some systemic race issue from decades ago? How much of a role does the size of the farm operation, the access to capital, there's just so many things out there. And I'm sure, given the amount of money and emphasis that USDA has taken, there has to be a really good root cause analysis that has been done, other than just looking at demographics of the industry. And so that would be great. Thank you for your continued leadership. And Madam Chair, thank you for the hearing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us. You are always such a tremendous contributor to all of the hearings on this committee. Under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any of the questions posed by a member. This hearing of the Subcommittee on Nutrition, Oversight, and Department Operations is now adjourned.